Okay, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to another EconTeach seminar. This time on how are economists using AI at work. I am Ramin Nasey. I'm an associate professor at UCL Economics, and I'm also a member of CTEL, Center for Teaching and Learning Economics. There's a lot of speculation these days about AI, right? And there's a tendency to jump into, science fiction stuff. Robots are going to kill us, robots are going to replace us, super intelligence, all of that. But we're not going to do that today. We're going to do the exact opposite. We're going to put our feet on the ground and talk about how people are actually using AI in their daily tasks. So we got a fantastic panel today representing economists who work in different sectors, consulting, corporate sector, banking, and then the public sector. And we're going to use them that, they're about their daily use of AI, from very little things, how they're using AI to edit their emails, to the most complicated things, whether they are using AI to build better financial models. Of course, at the back of our mind, we have these broad questions, right? How AI is changing the role of economists, how AI is changing the comparative advantage of economists. Do we need economists in the future at all? And, as teachers, as instructors, how should we adapt our teaching for this new world of AI? So I'm going to introduce our panelists, actually ask them to introduce themselves in a bit. But before that, few housekeeping matters. Obviously, the session is being recorded, and I'm going to upload it afterwards in our CTEL YouTube channel. And thank to those of you who already opened up your camera, and if the rest of you can open, that would be really appreciated. It makes the conversation more authentic and more human, let's say. And feel free as the conversation starts, please feel free to put your questions in the chat, and I'll look at them, pick them up, and ask the panelists as we move on. And finally, there is a survey. So if you are an economist, I'm actually very interested to know how you're using AI. So if you're an economist, in a sense, you have studied economics and now you're working, may I ask you to fill out this survey that I just put in the chat, right? So I think that's that. Without further ado, let me just jump into the conversation. Our conversation is going to have three parts today. Part one, it's all about context. Let's get to know our panelists, right? Their work, their background. That's part one. Part two, let's ask them about how they're using AI in their work. And part three, let's move forward, think forward that, how AI is going to change the role of economists in the future. And as instructors, what skills do we need to provide them with? So without further ado, I'm going to ask the panelists, go one by one. Could you just introduce yourself and walk us through your career journey? What did you study? Where did you study? What companies did you work for? Yeah, so Kadambari, would you like to go first?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Kidambari. I did the BSc Economics degree at UCL and I graduated in 2023. Right after graduating, I started working at Compass Lexicon as a research analyst. Compass Lexicon is an economic consulting firm and they specialize in competition policy, economic disputes, and litigation and international arbitration. And I work in the competition economics team. So, broadly, what we do is conduct in-depth economic analyses, and these are conducted for clients and lawyers, and they cover a range of issues such as mergers, market conduct investigations, such as cartel cases, and other regulatory matters. And the analyses we produce then serve as economic evidence and underpin expert testimony in court. So that's basically broadly what I do.
Very good. I'm going to ask you more about your company and what you do later on.
Yep.
Beatrix, your career journey.
Hi, my name is Beatrix. I also graduated from UCL BSc Econ in 2022, and then I did a master's in data science and public policy also at UCL Econ. While I was studying at UCL, I also participated in some CTEL events and activities, which is really inspiring. And now I work in a bank called SPD Bank. The full name is Shanghai Pudong Development Bank. It is a Chinese bank, and we have a branch in London. So I'm in the financial markets department, and I trade as a trader, and I also analyze the market as an economist.
Very good. So, Kadambari and Beatrix, both of you, so it's essentially your first jobs, correct? Lexicon and SPD Bank, correct. Alex.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm a little older, actually did L100s economics at UCL back in the global financial crisis days, and went into publishing via law, went into venture capital for a bit before landing up in the realm of artificial intelligence sort of 5 or so years ago. I currently work at the Ministry of Justice in the Justice AI unit. We were sort of brought in to build up the civil service capabilities, building some in-house tools, technology, but also seeing sort of where they could be best implemented. There's quite a big backlog within the justice system as a whole, but particularly in the criminal justice system, sort of through the whole journey through courts, through prisons and probation, rehabilitation. So yeah, applying to see where the tools will be put to best use there. Thanks.
Thank you. So, Kadambari, back to you. Compass Lexicon, this is a consultancy. Could you just explain to us what it does? I mean, assume no knowledge, no. So it would be good if you could just give some examples of what you actually do on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So, within the competition team, I work on like the cases I work on depend on the different cases that are happening at the time. So, I've worked on some mergers where we kind of have to do economic analysis to show the Competition and Markets Authority why we think a merger should be approved and why it might not cause any competition issues. So we test out various theories of harm and we show these quantitatively and show what we believe will happen in the case of the merger happening and if it didn't happen. So we basically provide that to the authority, and we also answer various questions regarding specifics of the industry and how how the product markets might overlap or how we think the product markets should be defined. And I also work on other cases such as cartel investigations and other market conduct investigations. So I worked on a case involving MasterCard and Visa where there was an investigation regarding their interchange fees, which are the fees they charge at the point of sale terminal when we use our cards to pay. And so when during this for this investigation, we ran regressions and we showed how we thought Visa and MasterCard were overcharging this merchant interchange fees, and we kind of modeled we got a lot of raw data from clients and we modeled different clients' demand and how the merchant interchange fees were affecting prices.
So essentially, is your client the government competition authority? Do they come to you to do these analyses?
So our client is the firms that are merging usually, or in the case of the Visa MasterCard case, our clients were the claimants that were taking this class action lawsuit against Visa and MasterCard. So it depends on the case, but mainly we represent the client that wants to merge, and we provide evidence to the Competition Markets Authority to kind of challenge their arguments.
Very good. Very good. That this competition is not going to harm the consumers. Yeah. Beatrix, SPD Bank.
Right. So SPD Bank is a huge banking group back in China, but we only have a small branch in London. And basically, we are a commercial bank instead of a development bank. So what we do is quite simple here. We have some profit-making front office departments. They may give loan to our clients, and we also have the financial markets department, who would monitor the liquidity for the bank. As in, if we have enough money to give out to the client, or can we borrow more money from outside? And we also have our own investment portfolio, and we will make some profits from it. So as my job, it is my first full-time job. It is quite exciting to join here because the size of the bank is relatively smaller, which gave me much more exposure in the department. I would do some trades in money markets and FX markets. For example, I will borrow and lend to other banks, and I may do some FX spot trades, or I will do FX derivatives. And we also look at the bond markets for our investment portfolio, especially the sovereign bonds. And we also look at some credit bonds sometimes.
So there's a team of you who do these trades?
It's quite actually the team is also within the department, and as a trader, I also look at the market. So we do both trade
good.
and market.
Very good.
Yeah.
Alex, just walk us through the daily activity of your job.
Sure. So I'm responsible, I guess, for a lot of sort of rapid prototyping and testing. We've got on the sort of public facing side, there's, I don't know, sort of 380 odd user services, if you will. And the aim is to somehow sort of prioritize which ones of these we can really get some bang for the public buck for, with digitizing, bring them into the 21st century, because there's a huge backlog of things we're looking at. So there's also another one I'm working on, which is more in-house, which Keir Starmer thankfully has given us a shout out for a couple of times. Transcription services for probation officers. So where you're, I don't know, if you're with a GP, say, and it can be a bit disheartening or disillusioning if they're just sort of constantly typing away the whole time. It feels like they're not really sort of focusing on you that much, and you can't really positively have 100% of their attention and focus, nor are they sort of actually looking at you while they're talking half the time. So we're building a product that's currently in test phase to help probation officers, actually focus on what they're saying, what they're talking about, where their conversation's going with these vulnerable people, and giving the summary and a proper sort of audit evidence trail at the end of that. And yeah, it's software development, but at a rapid pace, I'd say, is what I'm doing.
And many of these, as you said, are public facing in a sense that you're helping the Ministry of Justice provide a better service to the citizens, essentially, correct?
I like to think so. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Now going back to, again, just to better understand the core responsibility. What's your core response, back to you, Kadambari, but core responsibilities of you, and walk us through the tasks that you do in a typical day. What are the tasks you do?
So a lot of the core responsibilities are with regards to data handling, because I'm a research analyst, so I'm kind of the lowest tier of the firm. We get large data sets from clients, and these are large corporate firms which aren't really keeping track of data with the intention of it to ever be analyzed. So it's not the cleanest data. It's very large. There's extensive amounts of information. So we take these large data sets and we clean them out. We figure out what we need from the various sources. We have to go back and forth and ask. We send what we call a request for information to the client to understand what their different, how they define their different variables and how they're storing information and whether they've given it the right name. For instance, over time, I realized that based on how we as economists classify variable costs and fixed costs, firms just kind of write whatever they want and log it however they want. And so you really have to go into the detail of how a firm has tracked information and what it really means. And then I help conduct kind of the basic analysis on that, running, like producing the regressions. Obviously, someone higher up will come up with the the exact regression formula, but I'll work on making adjustments to it and changing it and running various iterations of it. Along with that, a lot of what I do is trying to understand requires like in-depth research into a client industry. So I do a lot of desktop research about very, very specific industries. So I work regarding life sciences companies, and they produce lab equipment. So I had to learn about all of this technical lab equipment and exactly how the different lab equipments might overlap in how they're used, their use cases, their customer bases, and stuff like that to get the context overall of the market.
Thank you. Very good. Beatrix, a typical day.
Yeah, so my typical day, first thing I went to the trading room and monitor the liquidity, and I would see if we short money within the next 1 week, or if we long money, and then
Sorry
I
to
will.
interrupt you. This is just for me to learn. I mean, what do you mean by monitoring liquidity?
Yes, so we have a system which will records our the money available in the bank. So we have for traders, we have different books. So especially for ours, we have banking book. The difference between books are like we have different risk appetite, and we will record the P&L for different purposes. And if we're using the banking book, and that basically means we have a lower risk appetite in this book. And to monitor the money in this book, we will open our system every day, refresh it, and I will see like each currency we have for tomorrow, for today, tomorrow, and within like a year, with our position at. For example, we don't have enough US dollar today, or we don't have enough GBP tomorrow, something like that. And then we will do the trade to either borrow money from outside, or lend money to others if we have too much money. Because having too much money at ours is like having some opportunity costs.
Let me interrupt you. So with in terms of date, you look at the data. So do you, in terms of generically speaking, is it data collection, analyzing data, producing, in terms of tasks, what's your typical day focused mostly on?
Yeah, so after that, I will look at our investment portfolio. As I mentioned, we have this bond portfolio, which is mainly composed of high quality liquidity assets, and they are mainly sovereign bonds. And we will usually have a target. For example, for this year or this quarter end, we will have this amount of high liquidity assets. And then every day we go to the office and we look at the investment portfolio. If today is a good day to buy some bonds from the markets, so I will log into my Bloomberg and check, for example, the US Treasury, 10 years US Treasury, or 5 years US Treasury, depending on our target investment. And then I will see, like, for example, if the yields of the US Treasury surge to a certain amount, I will probably think that is a good position to buy it, and I'll do the trade.
So basically, monitoring the data, what's the situation of the bank, monitoring the data, what's the situation of the market, and then deciding the trade. Very good.
Yeah, and just one
Yeah.
more thing, because we are a smaller bank, so sometimes I would do some compliance work, like know your customers or due diligence as well.
Thank you. Alex, a typical day?
So, majority of my day is spent with stakeholder engagement and management, I'd say, sort of trying to hear, listen to sometimes conflicting demands that people have of their sort of vision of a new product, and I guess trying to obtain the data to back up some of those decisions and assumptions, and to test them.
Do you just give an
Sorry
example?
to speak very
Yeah.
sorry to speak very broadly and vaguely. Yes, I don't know if the director of HR or a trade union, say, doesn't quite like the idea of an algorithm making decisions. we have to communicate that yes, we have a plan and there's a human in the loop at all times for these products we're making. And yes, that might mean some compromises in the roadmap for the release might be slowed down a bit, and then yeah, pass that on to the up the chain of command.
Okay, before moving to part two, which is the actual, how are you using AI? Let me just ask this question. So, if you wanted to use one word to describe how you're feeling about AI today, just one word about how you're feeling AI today, what would be that word, Kadambar?
I think it's useful.
Useful, Beatrix,
It's very exciting.
exciting,
Yeah.
Alex.
Responsible.
Okay, great, great. Me as well, exciting. For me, it's more exciting to learn. And so let's go to AI in practice, the part two of our conversation. Can you tell us just briefly, if I want to ask, what are the AI tools that you use, just in terms of listing them? Alex, let me start with you. Just list them.
Sure. So Cursor, Lovable, Superbase, decorative agents within Microsoft 365 Copilot,
What was the
Notebook
first one?
LM,
Sorry, what was the first one?
Cursor. So it's a more sort of development environment, but it's great for sort of if you want to have a tinker and rapidly try and build. It works great with Python. It works okay with R, Stata, etc. If you want to build some front end and back end applications, it's a helping hand to sort of get you there. It works from prompts. You can iterate very quickly with it, but has all the sort of bells and whistles of a good. You can build a full stack application with that. Also do some sort of locally hosted things. So GPT for all. I don't know if anyone's come across that, but that's a nice. You need a semi-powerful machine to run it on, but that'll do. That'll run a locally hosted small LLM for you very nicely. Use that quite a bit. And then I guess on my phone as well, there's quite a lot of things behind the scenes. So I'm not having like a little sort of personalized briefing and news alerts set up running in the background. That's mostly just through through Google's ecosphere, and a lot of extra Microsoft products as well. But no, I would highly recommend everyone to have a look at sort of Lovable. That's for, well, you could maybe sort of one shot your idea and it will create a whole web page or app for you based on how well you describe it. It's quite phenomenal to see because you can see it working as well as it builds it for you.
Okay. Kadambar?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't use as many. I use mainly like ChatGPT and Copilot in terms of OpenAI platforms. But we have within our firm some tools that they've generated themselves to kind of look at, for instance, precedent in the competition market authorities or like legal precedents that have been set in the past in cases, or for very specific uses, such as we have like a Stata tool, specifically a Stata AI tool that's been developed by the data science team at my company. So I use those more specific tools, but generally Copilot and ChatGPT.
Very good. And does your company buy the service for those, ChatGPT and Copilot?
Yes.
Good, good. And then you had these in-house customized one, which you mentioned. Beatrix?
For me, I also use ChatGPT and I also use DeepSeek, which is the Chinese LLM model. It is free. DeepSeek is for free, and the model is almost as good as ChatGPT. And I also use I believe it's also AI powered. It's called Alter for some voice to text, audio to text transformation. So that's basically three major apps that I'm using right now.
What was the last thing? Would you be able to go through it again, please?
OTTER, Alter. It's I think it's AI powered translation app. It's like you will it's app on the phone and you can record when you're having the meeting and it can summarize the key points from the conversation automatically and it is very correct.
Okay, very good. Very good. And so let me ask this. I before opening up, going into more in depth. I would like to know, for which tasks do you use these AIs for? So I'm going to read a list of generic tasks for you. And if you use that, please raise your hands. Maybe the rest of the group can do as well. All people, their cameras are open. So drafting and editing written content. This could be email, reports, article, or policy brief. Okay. Summarizing documents, that could be reports, article, research papers, meeting notes. Okay. Writing and organizing meeting materials. Beatrix, you just gave an example. Okay. Generating presentation materials. Okay, one hand up. Alex, not sure. Okay. Assisting with coding or debugging. Okay. Conducting data analysis or modeling, running regressions, forecasting trade analysis, asking the bot to do that. Yeah, nobody does that. Yeah, interesting. Performing textual analysis, qualitative analysis of texts. 2, 3. Creating data visualization or charts. Again, I don't, yeah. Oh, okay, Alex. Conducting research or information gathering. This could like literature review. Nobody does that. And developing AI-powered tools like other chatbots. Okay. And brainstorming. Okay, interesting. So let me go then one by one. I mean, you gave us the tasks, you gave us the AI that you're using. I would like to go more in depth with each of you. Like, let's walk to the task that you use AI. What task do you use AI for? How do you use start from the very basic ones to the most complicated? Yeah. Kadambari.
So I think since a large part of my job requires data analysis, it becomes really important to use well, at least complement your own codes with AI. I think as I said, we use very large data sets, so our codes take a very long time to run, and it's extremely strenuous to debug codes after, by running them iteratively. So it's a lot better if your code is cleaner, has less errors to begin with, and also is optimized to be the shortest length of code or the most efficient code so that it runs faster and is just efficient overall. So in that sense, even if we write our own codes, we always run them through some sort of AI platform so that we can see how we can shorten the code, optimize it, and just to make sure that if there are any mistakes, we can catch them in a first pass. So I think that's one of the big ones. I also, like I said, we often have to contextualize all of our quantitative work. So we have to understand like large amounts of information about a client industry, and we have to, so for generic market research, it's very useful to use AI. You can get a sense of the different products.
Can you give us an example of generic market research? Yeah.
So, because a lot of the information we receive is confidential, especially in mergers and other cases. We can't actually feed any of that information into an AI module, but what we can do is understand kind of basic market information. Who are the top competitors in a market? What do these firms produce? What are the large overlaps between these different firms? Specifics about how a product could be used. So it's possible that a product is like, for instance, when I worked on the lab equipment case, there is lab equipment that can be used for more than one purpose, but might be designed more specifically geared to a purpose. To understand that it can be substituted for another product is important for context and isn't some knowledge that we would have already because, the life sciences industry is very complex.
And just for me to, so far you said with, the most important one, I would say, no, the first one you mentioned is debugging, running the code. Do you put the code, where do you put the code in? Is it ChatGPT or?
ChatGPT, Copilot. We also have an in-house data module, but that's better to use when you're stuck with code. So it kind of helps you out with what to write, whereas ChatGPT is much better for optimizing code.
Very good. And then for the generic market research, you said you still rely on the chatbots, correct?
Yeah, Copilot, ChatGPT.
What if it's not generic? Could you remind me what you do?
So for not direct generic information, we do have to do some amount of document review. So I have worked with some AI tools that have been provided by law firms, which often when there's like a large number of documents, for instance, if there's litigation that has spanned a couple of years, there's internal communications, business reports, and things like that, which can often be like 1,000 documents. And so lawyers have their own AI-powered document review systems that streamline based on specific key search terms. And then as you review documents, they pick out which documents are the most relevant. So they remove any documents that are completely irrelevant.
Thank you. So, during your day, you're really using, this is how if I want to summarize it, correcting the bugs for the codes. Second, asking to do generic market research, and then using the customized version of AI for all these legal documents, the precedents of this case and that case. Very good. Beatrix?
Yeah, thanks. Remember, you also mentioned about the privacy. That was also one of our concerns, especially dealing with the client information. You can't really upload the client related information to the open source, or even the ChatGPT model. It's like, if I am going to do something, I have to first anonymize the client. And then if the context is very general, I can then upload it to the ChatGPT. And it is kind of requires
What's
a
this
lot more
nature
work.
of thing? What is it that you're down? The nature of that data? What is it? Is it numbers? What is it?
Well, I can give an example. For example, we have statistics about our profit and loss this year, and we have different products, and then we have to calculate the profit that we made from each product, and then by each month. It's kind of repetitive. And you can imagine it would be great if the AI can do it. However, it's also a kind of sensitive data. So you can't really upload it, all the data sets to ChatGPT or DeepSeek and ask them to process it for you. So that is one thing. So I would do is I will ask some help from ChatGPT about the code. I will do some automation using the Python code, or um just maybe it's not Python, but it like can be other like coding languages. So I usually use Python, and then it gave me a basic automation model, and then I can upload our Excel file to our cloud computing platform, and then do the automation there, and I can get a cleaner data set as a result. So that's how I use AI in general. And yeah, also the app I mentioned, Alter, it is very good for documenting and getting the key points from the conversation. However, most of our meetings are also very sensitive, private, so it is hard to actually use it in our every meeting.
So again, the main use, this is how I understand it, is about generating the code, correct?
Yeah,
Is
and
the
then
code
also debug.
debug, yeah, generating the code, debugging the code you have, and then in this latter, you mentioned you use this bot for keeping the notes in the meeting.
Give me the notes,
Yeah.
but very rare. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, so MOJ went with quite a large enterprise license, both for Copilot and OpenAI, actually. So we don't have to sort of worry too well. There's always a question and a big responsibility on what sort of data you do and don't share with Jonas Vise. By default, we're obviously opted out of training any future models through that enterprise license, but people are human and they can always sort of share the wrong things, etc. So that's sort of one thing we're aware of. But the point I was sort of wanted to make on that is synthetic data is a great use for us. So rather than having to risk any, be they sort of prisoners or employee
What do you
personal
mean by
details.
synthetic data? Could you just give an example, please?
Sure. So we might model sort of various touch points. We sort of try it. We'd build a sort of Python model to help us make it emulate a real world data set, which would be truly anonymized. Not necessarily to train a model, but to test features of a product we're building, say.
So my understanding is that the privacy is, of course, a main concern here, right? So you use two ways of going around it. The first one you mentioned, you say you buy the special license, that correct? That the company commits to the privacy, or no, you're not doing that. Did I understand you correctly?
And yeah, the Ministry of Justice has, not for each and every employee, but for a select few champions, we're calling them.
So
who are using it.
in theory, you can upload the data there. And correct?
Yes, it won't be, and that won't be used for training any of their
Okay,
Microsoft
great.
or OpenAI's models. That will be your data.
Very good. And then in the latter case, you said you can use synthetic data. You can ask the Chat GPT or anything to produce a data set, and then which kind of mimics, which is close to reality, and then you do your analysis there. Very good, very good. Okay, just let me remind everyone, if you had any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat as the conversation moves on. Thank you. We are heading close to our final part of our conversation, but before that, let me ask, I think is the most important, one of the most important questions, is that for you, if you have to pick the most valuable use of AI for you, what would be that? Kadambar?
I mean, I think it's definitely the debugging and optimizing of codes. I think there's always a different way to write any code to fit a certain function, and everyone writes it differently. But AI can kind of take different examples and make the most efficient form of that code, which just kind of streamlines the process and reduces any waste of time.
I mean, in terms of a measure, so can you give us a measure of productivity boost after AI, in terms of how long do you spend on checking this before AI and after AI?
I'm sure it's quite a lot. It probably does cut down time by like 30–40%.
Great. Beatrix, the most valuable use.
It's also related to coding. It is about telling me what is the optimized automation method, and how to build the automation step by step. Because I'm not a strong coder.
Could you give me an idea about the automation? What do you mean by that?
It can be about processing the repetitive work that I mentioned, processing the data for our internal purposes. Like for like each month we have to have a statistics, but it is very repetitive, and all we need to do is like adding and changing to different filters and adding some conditions, which is it would be like much easier if it's done by AI. And another thing is we also look at the market and we try to forecast the inflation on our own. We try to build our own inflation model. And for those microeconomic model, we have the traditional ones, but now we are thinking about using some real-time data and do some nowcasting. So we had an idea, but how can we do that? Maybe I will ask ChatGPT to suggest me a model and give me some code, Python code,
Good.
to make that model happen.
Very good. Alex, the most valuable.
We've had the most joy with deploying some agentic AI, and by that I mean AI that can take sort of simple actions on your behalf. Obviously, we want everyone to be sort of double checking the work and approving it before it can go any further. Mostly so far, that's just been on sort of simple form filling, where a lot of employees would be, sorry, civil servants would be just copy and pasting, where two server clients don't quite match up. There's someone needs to max that data up. That's in the past been, unfortunately, some poor soul had to, copy and paste sometimes across two machines. Yeah, we managed to link those together in quite a nice way. Also meetings that could have been an email. Just sending a avatar in your place. They'll give you a 2 or 3 liner at the end. Maybe get your agenda across as well. That's been a real great time saver for me personally.
Wow. Wow. Surprised. Those low-hanging fruits, that could. So before moving on to the final part, let me just ask you this. Have you ever had an AI tool to make a hilariously wrong suggestion? What happened? Right. By the way, I asked ChatGPT to give me this question. Right. Any idea? Like something really wrong with AI. Have you had that experience? Any 3 of you? No? Something really wrong.
I've never had an experience, but I know that there were students that were like using references of papers that didn't exist at different universities, which was a bit concerning.
Yeah. One thing, because ChatGPT said they now have the latest news in their model, and one day I asked about the recent inflation release, and they told me a figure that was from a year ago.
Good, good.
And sorry, similarly in the criminal system, when there's if the model training cutoff data has been not once certain judicial decisions have been made, can be quite frustrating to be plainly wrong.
That was good, Clodagh. I'm following the chat as well. There are some funny examples there. So I remember one of my colleagues wanted to see if it's good at finding out plagiarism. So it uploaded the Constitution of US and asked whether it is AI generated, and it said yes. So let's move on to the final part of our conversation. And so it's really about these bigger pictures. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? And, the future economist. So what are the challenges do you think have you or your team have encountered in adopting AI? The main challenges. Kadambari?
So I think the big one for us is that a lot of the information we use is confidential and we can't feed it into an AI module. And along with that, we don't have that much visibility on what the AI module has been trained on, so we can't always rely on that information blindly. So I think with regards to, for instance, literature reviews, that's why we always do our literature reviews independently. We might use some AI tools to summarize papers if we just want to get a sense of whether it is useful to go and then review that paper in detail. But in general, it isn't, because we don't understand the sources well. We can't be entirely reliant on it. It's something that kind of in our industry complements the tasks that we're doing rather than replaces our function in them.
So privacy, and then the issue is the reliability because of its black box nature. Could you give me an example of that?
So I think for some uses, for instance, with ChatGPT, it'll if it's just like some basic market research that could be available on like Bloomberg, Google, it'll have like the sources written at the bottom, so you can kind of go into the source, have a quick look, and see whether all of that information is coming from a reliable source because everything's linked. But if you were asking it about a research paper and to summarize the theory, it often oversimplifies something or it takes a sentence out of context and summarizes it so it seems like a paper is saying something that it might not be saying. So I think those are the kinds of ways in which, you do have to double check the source and take it back within context so it's not just pulling out a very specific aspect.
Beatrix?
I would say some models and some Python code that I use AI to generate may not work. And especially I'm not good at coding. So first I will rely on AI to generate some model for me, and then I will try it in my own Python script. But if it doesn't work, I have to think why it didn't work, because if I ask the AI to debug it, sometimes it doesn't give me the answer, and I have to think, oh, because here the filter is wrong, something is wrong, and I tell the AI to correct it, and then it can correct it for me. However, if it's a very long code, it is hard to debug it on my own, so it may give me some extra work to do.
Alex?
It's sort of two extreme, well, not extreme, but ends of school of thought here. One to sort of see it as a magic bullet for everything, and it's exactly the right tool for any task. And I know, especially as compute gets a bit relatively cheaper, you can brute force a solution to whatever your sort of data problem may be, just by chucking AI at it, continually prompting, refining, iterating. And then at the other end, people who view it with complete sort of skepticism and a bit of a negative bias, and are sort of always looking for every single mistake, and I don't know, perhaps feel threatened by it taking the majority of their roles in the future, which might lead on to a totally different discussion. But I know that there are those that embrace it a bit too sort of full hard-heartedly, and yes, don't have that sort of professional skepticism to question and critically think about the output. And then yeah, those who sort of avoid it like the plague, which I don't know, I hope won't come back to bite them when suddenly it's mandatory to start using it, as we're seeing in some workplaces now.
So do you have any concerns, any three of you, ethical, professional? Who would like to go first? Any of you? Concerns?
I think the biggest concern for us is still about the privacy and anonymity.
Privacy? Any other thing than privacy?
I think just the overall reliability of it. I don't think it's like something that you can just 1,000% rely on. You do have to do your own, you do have to give it like the human touch and check things.
I mean, if I want to summarize, Alex, yeah, you wanted to add.
I was just going to say the inherent bias that's baked into some of these models from the training data, just from the human nature that exists in the digital world or on the internet,
Yep.
for better or for worse, and how you mitigate that.
Privacy, reliability, and inherent bias, because it's been trained probably by bias data, past. And this is really interesting. If I want to summarize our conversation, it's kind of very, for me, many of the tasks you mentioned are very low level, in a sense that, you are doing most of the things as an economist. All of the skills are still there, really, in terms of comparative advantages, which is very pleasing for now. But this is, I think it's my favorite question I would like to ask. We're moving towards the end, few questions left. And everyone in the audience happy? Happy? Yeah, good, good. So this is my favorite question. This is how I think about myself. So when you come to the university, study economics, we try to focus on developing three set of skills. This is what we think of ourselves. Skill one, economic thinking theory, right, is about, okay, people respond to incentives. There are always trade-off. People are forward-looking. So that kind of thinking like an economist. Skill two, data analysis. How can I collect data? What variables matter? How can I analyze this data? And skill three is the communication. right? How do I present it? How do I write it? So this is how I think of myself, teaching these three set of skills. Now, I would like you to answer this question. So in your experience, which of these skills is AI complementing and which of these skills AI is replacing? Kadambari?
I mean, I think the big one that it can really help replace is kind of how your output is towards your audience. I think sometimes as economists, we often forget how much assumed knowledge we are taking and while writing any briefings. So just to understand that if something is being written for a different audience, AI can help you kind of be like, no, but that's too complicated. That might not be clear. So I think that's something that, AI can largely replace, especially with drafting. I do think that a lot of the data analysis and data handling is still very heavily it still does very heavily require can only be like slightly complemented by AI in terms of like coding help, but does largely require an economist's input and like technical expertise.
So the only replacement is the communication. The rest of it is complementing.
Yeah.
Beatrix?
Yeah, sorry, can you remind me of the three aspects? One is
Economic thinking, theory, right? Data analysis, communication.
right. I think it can complement the data analysis part, especially the repetitive work that I mentioned. But for the economics theory part, it is hard to compare to human because at least we know how to pick the best model for the data, and we know some the deficiencies of some models. And as economists, we are aware of the I think it's more about the econometrics skills, some skills that ChatGPT may overlook in the practice.
Alex, would you like to add? Or yep.
Yeah, I'd say complements all three, and I'd sort of see it as having a spare student or, well, not quite professor, but maybe grad student to hand if you have any sort of questions you want to bounce off, or use it to critique your own arguments and presentations and data analysis. That's what I quite often end up using it for, sort of chatting throughout the day to please see the opposite side of view of this and please critique this. Is there anything I maybe haven't considered? Can you try and look for my blind spots for me, please? But no, I think the communication is key, and especially if you can, almost as if you had sort of twice the amount of time to do something, you could tailor it to certain audiences. Say, like if you had an extra 2 hours in the day to work on something, you can be doing that in the background for you. Sometimes the way I see it as my sort of assistant in some regards that way.
Two more questions and then we're done. So if you have got any questions, please put it in the chat. I got two more. Looking ahead, the future economist, what do you think will be the most essential skills that they need to have in this new AI world? Beatrix, would you like to go first?
Yeah. Well, I have a thought like I have to know the things first before the AI tells me what to do. So, for example, the models, I think I will be comfortable to use the models if I already learned the models before and I've heard it before. And in terms of the ideas and some conclusions, if I have the similar conclusions, then I will also listen to what AI said. But if the AI's conclusion is contradicting, probably not.
I mean, the metaphor for all is just another or an assistant next to you. That's the metaphor that I'm getting from your answers so far. Alex, you want to add?
I mean, the area I'd look at exploring is more sort of machine learning and also sort of multimodal AIs. So remembering that there's a big world out there just outside of your generative AIs and your chat GPTs, etc. Some very exciting things going on in machine vision, etc. Worth keeping an eye on. Also for regulation as well, especially in sort of the major markets. It's very great to see what sort of policymakers are thinking and setting and their philosophies to regulation around AI.
Kadambar?
Yeah, I think just, if a task is repetitive and is taking a very long time to do, to then just do the due diligence of looking up different tools that can help you and not being closed-minded to that, because I think it can save a lot of time. And you only really learn about the different tools out there if you're out figuring out what you can make more efficient.
I think the very last question is really if you want to give an advice to me, someone who's thinking about economic teaching, what do we need to change in order to adapt to this this new world? Kadambari?
I think in terms of changing things, I wouldn't have a lot of suggestions. I think there are like small bits of kind of having a push to learn certain coding languages like Python outside of this data and R that we always learn, just so you can, if needed in the future, try to implement small uses of machine learning, of AI, if you wanted to. And I think that's something that like a lot of people in my industry are now doing like masters in data science or trying to then build on the knowledge they already have in economics to be able to use that in combination with some sort of machine learning or AI. And I think that would be a very interesting way to do things.
Very good. So complement the economics knowledge, right? The theory bit. Very good. Beatrix. Oh, sorry, Alex.
I'd say do a sort of end-to-end project, as it were, with a bit of scaffolding and some examples would be invaluable to students, even if it's just for sort of their portfolio, but also the learning experience. Because of that, you've got the facility now to make learning sort of hyper personalized, I think, at scale. So each and every one of 200 students, say, could have their own personalized assignment, if you wish. It'd be very cool. And then you can also automate some of the marking on the back of it. I don't know if anyone's, so a course I did was a Harvard CS50, it's called. Would highly recommend it as a intro to computer science. And the automation of the marking, the feedback, etc. It blew my mind back in the day when I did it, sort of 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah, it's supposed
Yeah.
to complement the teacher as well. The skills of it as well. Beatrix.
Yeah, I totally agree with Barry. I think more practical with AI is important, especially about econometrics. And I know there are some causal effects analysis with AI in econometrics, and that's something I didn't learn in my undergrad, but I learned it in my master's, which is very exciting.
Well, I'm gonna, omit that from the recording. Anyway, but no, thank you all. We're run out of time. Thank you so much. I mean, it's so kind of energizing to find out there's still a role for economists in the future, right? And this machine, I mean, the metaphor that you mainly talked about as an assistant is more of a complementing the skills that you already had as an economist. And let me just thank you for your time and the rest of the audience. Thank you for those of you who kept your camera open, and thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. Bye.
Thank you so much, Roman.
Pleasure. Bye.